everybody, and welcome to the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpsons fans, brought to you by thatshelf.com. Every episode, we talk about a movie parodied on The Simpsons. Maybe it was The Simpsons that introduced us to the film, or maybe when we finally saw it, we realized, hey, that's where that Simpson joke comes from. Regardless, each week we pick one that one of us hasn't seen or hasn't seen in a while, watch it, and come together to discuss. I'm your host, Adam Scholes, and joining me as always is the Venom to my Eddie Brock, my co-host, Nate Storing. How are you doing today, buddy?
Hello, Eddie. I'm doing good.
I'm like, do I want to be Eddie Brock? But then
You don't want to be Venom.
Well, fair, but was Topher Grace Eddie Brock in Spider-Man 3?
He was. I did think of that when I was putting that in the script. I was like, Foreman. Foreman is back.
I guess it's appropriate. Well, you're probably sitting at home wondering, what's going on? Why are these guys popping up in my podcatcher again? Because we're currently on hiatus while we record a new season of episodes for the fall. But with season 36 of The Simpsons sort of recently wrapping up, we invited current showrunner Matt Selman to sit down with us to talk about the most recent season, its movie parodies, and his own relationship with movies. And shockingly, he graciously said yes. Matt has been with the writing staff of The Simpsons since 1997. And in our usual period for the podcast, he wrote some of my favorite episodes of season 9 onwards, like Natural Born Kissers, Behind the Laughter, and Trilogy of Error. And more recently, he's overseen what many have described as a renaissance of the show, with a combination of creative, format-breaking episodes and character-driven drama alongside the gags that have always defined the show. So, without further ado, here is our interview with Matt Selman. Welcome to the show, Matt. Thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on the renewal. I think you guys kind of gave a lot of Simpson fans a bit of a heart attack at the start of the season with the so-called season finale or series finale, but we're glad to know that you guys are still going to be around for at least a few more years.
Well, thank you for being briefly misled.
I definitely remember getting the text message from Nate of like, you need to check your phone, like something's happening, and then of course watching the episode and being like, oh, thank goodness.
I mean, we sort of hope that if you're watching it, but it's the season premiere, you'd think, well, they're saying it's a finale, but why would they do the premiere as the finale? Like, that was important to do it as the premiere. Like, we did it as the season finale, series finale. That could have didn't want to accidentally manifest the end of the show and put like 500 people out of work just to be clever. So that was my worry. But it didn't happen.
It's funny, Nate and I were both born in 1988, so we're basically the same age of the show, and I've sort of had this ongoing existential crisis that if the show ever ends, does that mean I will also cease to be? So knowing that at least I got another 4 years at the very least. So
there's no shortage of are all the Simpsons coincidences a window into the simulation?
Right.
Exactly.
People like to call them predictions. I call them coincidences.
For sure. Matt
Groening and I are going to do an animation festival next week. And he's like, okay, everyone is going to ask us about the predictions. And he's like, if you give your pedantic answer about math and history one more time, I'm going to kill you. So I'm going to bring a wizard's hat, and we're just going to pull out things and say random stuff and see if they come true. I'm like, that's what people want.
Yeah.
They want a wizard's hat.
I mean, I'm a big fan of this writer, Jane Jacobs. And she also got accused of predicting things a lot. And what she said was, I'm just really good at observing the present, which I think is actually kind of true of The Simpsons as well.
Well, Matt, I mean, I think people probably obviously know you as a TV writer and as a producer, but we're just sort of curious. Again, our show is all about, movies and discovering movies and movies through the lens of The Simpsons. So, what are you like as a movie fan? What are some of your favorite movies and directors?
I would not call myself a cinephile. I mean, who doesn't like movies? But the job is so sort of exhausting and tiring that, my ability to, savor the cinematic art form is I don't have the bandwidth for it. A terrible way of saying it is I have people to watch movies for me. I'm like one of the common man. I just want a fun movie that's entertaining. I don't want to be super stressed out. I want to just see something kind of dumb and silly and popcorny and like I like the Marvel movies, you know. I like all the things that Gen X dudes my age are supposed to like
Right.
Back to the Future, like all the super on the nose basic 43-year-old dude stuff I like. Like
Totally.
people are like, you got to see Midsommar. I'm like, no. Tell me a little bit about it. Okay, no. I don't want to see kids getting hurt. I don't want to see families that are sad. I don't want to like worry. We have enough worries. Like I'm of the like Preston Sturges, I guess, sort of just forget your troubles school of movie appreciation. Like I just saw Mission Impossible, last Mission Impossible. I loved it. I know people picked it apart and said this was wrong, that was wrong. I listened to another podcast, and I listened to the movie reviewers on The Ringer has a movie podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're really smart people. I thought their criticisms were picky and babyish and pretentious and ridiculous and embarrassing for those critics. The degree to which they did not appreciate how hard it is to tell that story.
Yeah.
If they didn't like it, great. If they were bored, respect. But they're having one foot in the movie industry, I know how hard it is to make a story make even just a little bit of sense.
Yeah.
And that Mission Impossible was terrifically fun for me. And the set pieces, of course, are the star. But I didn't hate all the other crazy world building nutso stuff either.
Yeah, it's worth it just for those two incredible stunt sequences. I mean,
I wasn't bored during any of it.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
And I was only very confused why. Did you guys see it?
Yeah.
Okay, I do have one question. Maybe you can answer this. Tom Cruise is trying to get Technology 1 into Technology 2 to trick the evil entity into dooming itself, right? That's his plan. Like the entity will never expect this.
Right.
When bad guy runs away with the thing that knowing that Tom Cruise wants to give him the thing. Why was that? Do you guys understand that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a big Alfred Hitchcock fan. And I'm also a big James Bond fan. And I think being a fan of those two things have taught me sometimes that shit just doesn't matter. And you're better off not thinking
I brought two planes as a backup.
You know,
it's.
I love that.
Of course he did.
Yes.
A red and a blue.
Yeah.
I brought a red. They should have said I brought a yellow one for me and a red one as a backup.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I would have no problem with that.
Yeah, totally worth it.
I just want to see Avengers Endgame or, that alien Romulus. That was stressful. But that's the level of stress I could handle. Like I just want I want to see Fantastic Four. I want to see Superman. I just people at work saw Friendship.
Oh yeah.
I do want to see Friendship, but I know I'm going to feel I'm not looking forward to Friendship the way I will be looking forward, because I know I'm going to be feeling weird feelings during Friendship, where during Fantastic Four, I'm not going to feel any weird feelings.
Yeah,
totally.
100%. You're in good company on this podcast. We're both, we love movies, but I think we're both kind of populists at heart. And
I like Sinners. Sinners wasn't too scary.
Yeah, Sinners was great. Yeah. Growing up, were there any movies that you kind of first encountered as parodies? Like, through Mad Magazine or other pop culture things that then you saw it and you were like, wow, oh, that's that thing.
Right. Well, definitely Mad Magazine was a big deal. Hold on one second. I'm getting something for you. Visual aid. Hold on.
Yeah, no worries.
So I just read this book.
Cool.
About the making of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Yeah.
Which is a movie which is too stressful a movie for me to ever really want to watch again. But the book was interesting. But it makes a point in the book about the Mad Magazine breakdown of Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, which was sort of their take was always explicitly say the subtext of the movie in a kind of bald way in their movie parodies. But that's not a bad thing to do for kids, to do this kind of visual, silly, cartoony Cliff Notes explanation of a movie. So I think I definitely read a lot of Mad Magazine parodies, and that oh my God, I love them. Like the Lord of the, I'm 453, so the Lord of the Rings, Ralph Bakshi.
Yeah.
I loved, there was one for The Exorcist that I remember really specifically, and the Superman ones, and Yeah, those were really. I mean, it's a shame that doesn't really exist anymore. But like, it certainly, I'm sure, fueled the whole first wave of Simpsons writers' ability and desire to do movie parodies and references on the show.
Well, it's funny. It's funny that you bring up Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, because I think for both Nate and I, our introduction to that play or that movie is the Simpsons parody.
Totally.
Like, there's, for us, so much of, Mad Magazine did exist when we were kids, but not really in the same cultural zeitgeist. Sure. But The Simpsons did, and like Simpsons really was this like gateway drug for so many of these like classic movies that, yeah, we've sort of have like a running tally of these movies that when we finally saw them, we're like, oh, that's what that Simpsons joke was referencing. Right. It was like, that's what this is supposed to be. So
in the Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf on The Simpsons, it was like the first. There are two major references to it. One, which is one very pithy exchange in one episode that I can't remember, but it's like the beginning Simpsons had the luxury of doing a short parody because we weren't so deep into like creative bankruptcy that we needed to like we can't just do this as one line, we got to do this as like a whole act.
Right.
So like then I did an episode that was like a full on 4-minute in-depth crazy Haskell Wexler cinematography, version. Yeah. But I mean, in a way, it's the first one. In a way, is more beautiful in that it was just a kind of a throwaway reference, and I don't remember the context. Maybe you guys do, but
we had this running gag as friends where we would go "Queen of the Harpies," which was the line.
Right. So,
and we had no idea what, like, we thought the line reading was funny.
Yeah.
So we would always say it, and then again, it's this thing of like, oh, what we're actually doing, it's not a Simpsons joke that we're doing.
Right.
But that's the beauty of it, right? So
your website is really beautiful and elegant. I was just looking at it again, and
thank you.
It's also very useful for us.
Oh, we
there you go, Nate. That must be the highest compliment you could get.
People always say, well, do you have that one person in the room who remembers everything so that you can say what you've done?
Right.
Like, no, we don't have that person. Because it's really hard to think of new things and remember all the old things at the same time. And you sort of, luckily this affords a sort of Groundhog Day style reality. We're always sort of resetting or rebuilding. So, obviously we don't want to do the same thing. We don't want to do Queen of the Harpies again. Like exactly the same thing. But if something kind of similar does happen, it's collateral damage for whatever passes for originality now.
Well, you did, this past season, you did a pretty in-depth After Hours parody, right?
Yes, there we go. Okay, that's good.
And that was like, there is an episode like in the early days that did like kind of an After Hours parody, but it was much more just like the vibe of After Hours of like.
What was the first one?
So it's Bart Sells His Soul.
Bart Sells His Soul.
The very end of that where, he's sort of running around. It's nighttime. He's trying to get uptown from downtown. And, and he like, there's a street cleaner who's kind of maniacal who goes past him and runs over his bike. Anyway, but it's like, there's no direct like line or scene or anything that it's particularly referencing. It just kind of looks and feels like After Hours. It's like the setup almost.
No, that's like the metaphor, like I was saying.
Yeah.
The old version was like just a glancing highlight for like people in the know, and now it's like we beat you over the head with it.
But that episode this season is amazing because it's like, I like work in New York. I lived in New York for several years. And so like seeing all this New York stuff so meticulously recreated, right? And also the feeling of that, kind of 80s movie vibe of like, Soho and the arts world. Like it's amazing that like that era of The Simpsons couldn't have done that, right? In such great detail. So
no, it's true. Being like into the 800s now, we're a little bit like Mad Magazine in that like, who else gonna do it? And when we stop doing it, no one's gonna do it. No one's gonna do it. We have a thing coming up, a Jules Pfeiffer parody, right? Like no other shows I'm pretty confident are gonna do a big animation thing in the style of Jules Pfeiffer. If you guys know who Jules Pfeiffer is,
I don't actually.
okay, there you go. He is a cartoonist from the kind of neurotic, intellectual 60s and 70s in New York, and a writer.
Okay.
And had a cartoon in the Village Voice, and he did the illustrations for the Phantom Toll Booth. Maybe you've heard of that.
Yeah.
And I think everyday guys such as yourself would recognize his art for his art. But like, yeah, he's dead. I'm old. But like, it is a fun responsibility to like take pieces of culture that like really no other show has the freedom and manifest to kind of get deep into and mess around there. And so Tim Long, the writer, producer of that After Hours show, came to us and was like, yeah, I want to do this Lisa After Hours show. And I was like, you can just feel light switches going on in your head because you're like, oh yeah, the New York of the 80s in film is such a genre, a specific genre of like art movies and the sort of few mainstream movies, and to put in like references to like Desperately Seeking Susan and all those terrific Lower East Side artistic filmmakers in that universe that doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. That magically does exist in Capital City for some reason.
Of course. Well, actually, that kind of jumping ahead a little bit, I think this feels like a good segue into this question that Nate and I are sort of curious about, because we know, and I think you've sort of alluded to this a little bit, but in the early days of the show, the movie parodies seem to be relegated to stuff that was sort of established classics, like The Godfather, Wizard of Oz, Planet of the Apes, these sort of old movies that, they were maybe 20 or 30 years established as people are going to get this reference. And as the show has, gone on, we've noticed that there's been more of a sort of comfortability doing more recent references. Like, for example, I know this past year you guys did Challengers, for example. Right. And I'm just curious, like, is that a conscious decision, or are you guys just, traditionally was the idea, if we're going to reference something, we need to make sure it's something that is going to stand the test of time? Or are you just now more, like you sort of said, you need ideas, and Challengers was a cultural moment, let's hop on that? Cultural
moments are fewer and far between now that with the death of the monoculture, right, gents?
Of course.
And so that even Challengers, most Americans probably don't know what Challengers is and don't know what that crazy scene is, but like enough people did. Like my daughter was watching that episode and she knew what it was, which was success.
Yeah.
And I wish we had more. I wish the culture generated more even Challengers level things that would be recognized, that did make an impact on a significant group of people. Like, those are hard to do, other than I guess Hawk Tuah, who is our new. I guess we have her forever now. She's our Hannibal Lecter, the icon that we can reference, for like a generation, and will still always be meaningful to a generation. So yeah, Challengers. I wanted to do something also, and I haven't ruled this out yet. From Saltburn, another, it's an indie movie, but there was some crazy stuff in there that if you had someone pleasuring themselves to a pile of dirt, right? That in a strange in a different context, that could be.
Yeah.
I try to encourage the writers to, like, if you go see a movie or watch a TV show over the weekend and something pops out as like a cultural moment, just put it on a card, and we'll put the card on a board, and probably it won't be in the show, but it could be.
Yeah.
We have a board full of things just called sillies, which I like because it's a very childlike name for the thing. And so it'll just be like a dumb joke. One is, like, one we haven't used yet is a mix up between an X-wing and a sex swing, right? That comic book guy receives a sex swing in the mail, and someone, Mo or whatever, gets a life-size X-wing fighter, right? I don't know where it fits. Who knows? Just put it on the board. It's silly.
I hope that one finds a home. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's really good.
I'm sure everyone, if we Google, Twittered that or whatever, it probably exists in comedy somewhere also, because the words are too similar for people not to
Right.
have already thought of it.
Right.
But
Right.
who cares? Who cares? I wish every Monday morning we would be so ahead. I wish we would be so ahead and on the job that Monday morning all the writers would come in. Maybe I'll be like, okay, let's just take the morning and put cards on the board from like stuff that we've absorbed in our cultural downtime, like you guys are saying. But we don't have as much of a production cushion, I was like, so we're always kind of
Right.
up against the gun. So the luxury of like, all right, yeah, what is there a moment from friendship that would be good? But like we did an episode this year, I watched Banshees of Inisherin on a plane. That was stressful, but I did like it.
It's a good one.
It was like, because as soon as he brings up cutting off the fingers, it's an interesting dramatic technique for the writer, director to say, like, I'm going to bring up something so horrible, you're going to be praying this doesn't happen for the rest of your experience of the movie, and then yet knowing it is going to happen and having a mental dialogue with yourself of like, oh, come on, please don't let this be the thing in the movie. But of course it's a movie, so why would they say it if they weren't going to do it and make that your worry cycle?
Yeah.
And then then he did it, which is insane. But that became it's a big move. But we didn't do that. But we didn't do the cutting off the fingers or the fingers choking the horse. But we just we did put like Mrs. McCormick. I don't know if you saw that episode, but we did put the Mrs. McCormick character in as just a prophetic Irish witch lady, to kind of amp up the drama of the whole thing, and the sort of Ned saying he's not gonna talk to Homer and ever again.
Mm-hmm. What is it about those like recent movies that makes you want to put a card on the board? Like, because like Banshees of Inisherin is probably even less recognizable to lots of people than say Challengers, but was a great, for the people who have seen it, is like a great callback. So like what is the thing that kind of makes you want to put it up there?
I don't know. I just try to remember to always be thinking when I see a movie, is this a card? Like obviously when I saw Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, like no card really jumped out.
Right.
Because those set pieces are terrific, but like nothing, we obviously could end a show with 2 planes or whatever, but it wouldn't feel like, for some reason it didn't pop out. We certainly have another one. There's another one coming up that I can't really talk about, but another indie movie influence that will certainly be prominently part of the Simpsons culture moving forward. That's a little teaser for your audience.
All right,
there you go.
That's
a scoop.
That's what I'm doing. That's the fingers cut off for your people.
Perfect.
Worry about this horrible thing happening.
Right. It's gonna choke a horse.
I'm curious too, because the other thing, like this season you had a White Lotus parody, and like there's, I guess in a way, television has become so much more of with prestige television anyway, has become more of a cultural moment. And do you think that in some ways like TV has replaced movies as the prime sort of prime parody generator in a sense?
It's an interesting question. In a way, the white hot audience enthusiasm for the shows that really pop these days is probably a little deeper than that of movies.
Yeah.
Especially like White Lotus that's released weekly and there's a build. And I think I'm a huge admirer of Mike White and the way he can build tension and like watching that season, I really loved it. I was bouncing the new season. I was completely bouncing off the walls, screaming at the television, which you can't do in a movie theater. You can actually.
Yeah,
but,
you might get kicked out, but you can do it.
Not these days.
It does sort of feel like also we're a TV show, so for us to do a parody, like we did a double sort of Fargo streaming prestige crime drama thing. Like if we're gonna go all in on something, it's easier to like. We did 24 a while back, and we did the White Lotus, or we have one coming up we actually have one coming up. It's a combo of TV and movies. I will. Here's a little breaking-ish news. We have a sort of Ripley. Ripley the show and Ripley the movie
Yeah.
Full length, black and white. So black and white, like the show, I guess.
Cool.
Episode. Our terrific writer producer Cesar Mazariegos did that, and I watched. I think if people are there, if the movie industry exists or screenwriting exists as a career, not sure about those things. If they did, what I would say to people who want to learn how to adapt a book into a movie is read the book, The Talented Mr. Ripley, and then watch the movie, with the Matt Damon movie, Talented Mr. Ripley, and see how they kept the spirit of it alive. They kept the main plot and story alive, but they simplified and enhanced, and more importantly, crafted an ending, a much more tragic movie cinematic ending than the book had.
Yeah.
I think that rewatching Ripley movie recently, I was really impressed how they created new characters and raised the stakes and brought in new relationships to create an ending that really felt like the whole thing is of a tragic piece.
Right.
Interesting.
And then in the show, I was prepared not to like the show, but then I started watching because everyone was like old and ugly and creepy and not, but they were. Now I think the show was actually smart to like go a different direction and not try to like out, fabulous the movie. The movie is pretty fabulous, and I thought that was also masterfully executed by a different, terrific set of filmmakers. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So anyway, so Cesar threw himself full into a super Ripley mega parody. I don't know. I wonder if there's definitely some transgressive behavior by Homer in that one.
I can imagine. I love that movie, so I'm really looking forward to that one. I haven't watched the show yet, actually.
Oh, Nate, you got to watch the show. The show is pretty good.
I mean, I was at first. I'm like, why is it so ugly? Why is it so gross? And then I just realized that who was it? Is it Zalian?
Yeah, it's Steve Zalian did it.
Steve Zalian is just so good. He knows what he's doing. It's actually really funny. In the moments, the comedy in it is really funny. And it's like if a dramatist does his work well, it's a gift to us as vampires to keep ourselves alive, to suck their blood, And I knew if I said, Cesar, do Ripley, he would go crazy, and he did. And it's really cool. But that probably won't even air until 26 sometime.
Okay.
Because that's one of our Disney. We do these Disney Plus exclusives,
Right. Okay. Interesting.
and so we said if we have a show that's sort of a straight big parody of like a streaming show, we'll put that exclusively on streaming as sort of there's a kind of streaming on streaming connection there.
So that kind of reminds me of just another question. Like you mentioned that, there's sort of a bit more of a drive with the parodies these days to go a little bigger, a little longer with the parodies, more complete. But I feel like even when we look back at like your early writing credits on the show, it seems like that's always been something you've been kind of interested in.
I'm a giant hack. I can't think
I
of
wouldn't say
anything.
that.
I would frame it as like, you've always seemed to be interested in breaking the format of the show, right?
I'm greedy for more. So instead of doing like one clever little thing and then as part of I'm like, no, let's savor it, right? Because we did the trilogy of error, right? That was the great writer John August, idea for the movie Go. And I remember seeing that and putting a little pinned a card in my brain that like that structure would make a really good Simpsons episode. And that was really fun to figure that out. I mean, the movie, it's a Simpsons episode based on the movie Go, which is 3 acts, each act resetting at the top of a common sort of plot event, and then going in 3 different directions, then reset. So 2 different, a story, then a reset, then another reset, and they all come back at the end. And they do kind of intertwine and interact and play off each other. But in our version, there's so much interaction and things that don't make sense in Act 1 and then make sense in Act 2 or Act 3.
Right.
It was a lot of work to figure that out.
That was when it aired. I just remember thinking, this is such a cool structure. And like I was, I can't remember how old I was. I was probably like 11 or 12, so didn't really understand. I certainly hadn't seen Go, didn't realize it was a Go reference. But just like this idea of like, oh, The Simpsons is doing something different in its storytelling, and admiring that. And then, you know, again, as you become older and you start to appreciate these things, and you don't think of it as just a cartoon. It also has a line that me and my sister to this day still quote at each other, which is when Lisa is trying to convince Homer to like get out of the kitchen, and he's like, she says something to the effect of like, Dad, do you wanna go upstairs and see my science project? And he says, no, but I sure don't want to eat this crappy breakfast. And we would quote that to each other whenever my mom made us something we didn't really like. So that episode, it's got a lot of love in the Scholes household. That's for sure.
Good. That's fantastic.
Is there something about like that sort of passion for structural, like, you know, creativity? Like, can you trace that back to something for you, or has that just always been something you've been attracted to?
I don't know. Maybe I'm just not good at doing regular stories. Not good at like human emotions and like people. Yeah, I randomly watched this. I was doing notes on a Simpsons sort of animatic last night. Then I kind of got distracted, and I went to Disney Plus and I watched Homer the Smithers, which is like I hadn't seen for a long time. And, you know, it's really funny, great episode. And, you know, it really does a good job of just like you're feeling what the characters are feeling in a nice way throughout, you know, and as writers, we all want to be able to do that. But if we can't, why not parody something? No, we can. We can do that. We can do emotions. But you just can't, I don't know. We're, at this point, I think I've said this a million times. It is if we're not doing stuff that's slightly bonkers, and in our version of experimental, then it's a wasted opportunity. But
well, I guess like that. I'm curious because I think for Nate and I, we adore the episodes that kind of break the rules and break, for lack of a better term, break the show, you know. And I know, you know, famously the Armin Tamzarian episode that fans were in uproar over by finding out that Principal Skinner isn't really Principal Skinner.
Right.
I'm curious, like, do you think now that the show has been on for so long that you guys are a little more comfortable breaking the show that way because you know that it doesn't really matter?
Yeah, I mean, we intentionally put that Tamzarian reference in the show of Bart's birthday, the fake finale. That was a provocative gesture on our part, to
right?
Enrage people. I remember watching that episode as a super fan with Tamzarian, and I didn't feel that betrayed at the time.
Neither did we.
Right.
I mean, we were younger when we saw it, and we loved it at that point. But I think there was just a certain group of people who were maybe very online who got really annoyed by it for whatever reason. But I thought, you know, it was a meta joke about the way the show works, and we liked that.
It was also was like the backstory of Bart's principal that important to you, the supposed backstory. And I mean, he still was in Vietnam. I mean, here's a question: was Skinner in Vietnam now?
Right, exactly.
Well, yeah, of course.
Was he? I literally have no idea. Someone tell me. Maybe he was in the Second Gulf War.
Right.
Maybe he was. I don't know. I mean, we all know that the Simpsons live in a warped, existential, crazy, paradoxical, time-bending contradiction of reality. So no one like.
Do you worry about that sort of thing? Like, do you worry about the comic book guys out there that will be like, actually, or do you just try and tell the best story?
No, I mean, if anyone has like a strong reaction to anything, I mean, apathy is the worst reaction, or just turning off the show. So,
right.
You know, I'm sure plenty of comic book guys have turned off the show, but the ones that continue to be angry about whether or not, you know, one piece of canon was sticky or not is, you know, that's a form of enjoyment for them, I suppose.
Right.
For
That's
sure.
the way they engage with the show, I guess. Yeah.
Right. I mean, There really been a lot of episodes also.
Right. How can you even keep track of all the canon? Is the, you know?
Right. I mean, if we did have that person in the room saying you did this, you did that, A, we'd be mad at them all the time. Although obviously we do say that sometimes, and B, it would just be, I don't know. I bet if we had hired an outside consultant to send them the script and say, did we do any of this, and is it really embarrassing? That actually would be useful. I'm sure there's no one on the internet who wants that job.
Yeah.
I was going to say.
Yeah. Don't wish that into the world.
Like, how much do I have to pay you to do it? I don't know. We have here's another cinematic upcoming thing we have. Well, I guess one thing we always made fun of a lot, and now we're doing again, is how the Godfather is overdone.
Right.
And, the moments from The Godfather are like the horse head are like The Simpsons did it beautifully, and I think they did it like 6 other times.
Yeah.
And the Godfather tropes are so cliched. Having said that, we have a giant Godfather 2 episode coming up.
Oh.
That is back and forth, present and past.
Mm-hmm.
About the Quimby saga, the Quimby family saga.
Ooh,
That's exciting.
Okay.
So it's a good story about if you're upset about Skinner's backstory, that's how much you're upset when you learn about Quimby's father's backstory.
That makes me even
Right.
more excited.
The mayor's father. But there's a scene in that where, in The Godfather 2, young Vito Corleone, played by Robert De Niro, great guys, he kills someone and then disassembles the gun and throws the parts away. Mm-hmm. So like the perfect crime, right? We do a similar thing where someone chokes someone with a sandwich and then throws the sandwich components apart carefully. It's what I think is funny and Godfather-y and
that's brilliant. That's perfect.
That's awesome.
Anyway,
and the structure of Godfather 2 in the early days of The Simpsons is not actually parody. There's some of the flashback stuff, but not the like parallel stories thing. So
no,
that's
it is.
cool.
It's like the all in. It's the all in.
Yeah,
That's cool.
that's awesome. I did have a behind the scenes question, which is about the current Payne movie classic.
Sure.
So could you explain just briefly, like to our audience, what that is? But I'm obsessed with it.
I think in 2009, we decided we would do a version of fantasy football, or fantasy sports, in which the players being auctioned off to have a slate were the movies coming out that summer. So we would have an auction, a fantasy auction, and instead of Tyreek Hill coming up and how much we pay for him, it would at that year it was like a Transformers movie, with the Transformers 2 or something. Mm-hmm. And then so someone would have Transformers 2, and someone would have The Hangover, and someone would have, first Lilo and Stitch, right?
Right.
In like those, I don't know, the years are all mixed up, but you know what I'm saying. So at the end of the auction, you have everyone has like 3 or 4 movies that are their movies for the summer, and their fantasy points are how much money that movie makes. So, it's really fun. I recommend. It's terrific for all offices. If any office wants us to help them do it, I'm sure we have a template or we can explain it. Like other TV shows have done it, and it's kind of a great staff fun building thing because then you're excited about the summer movies. And I've never won. But now at this point, I just go in, spend all my money as fast as I can, and leave because it's too stressful.
Is the auction like a live auction, or is it like a silent auction? How's that work?
A live auction, so it's really fun. So we have this one wonderful writer-director who used to work on the show, Eliza Hooper, comes back every year and pulls the ping pong balls out of the hopper, and it'll be like, and now we have the big movies you have to split up into chunks. So it'll be like,
right.
It'll be like half of Fantastic Four.
Got it.
And so the 3 I have this year, which I don't think I'm going to win, are Smurfs, all of Smurfs, all of the Bob Odenkirk revenge movie. What are those
Oh
called?
yeah, Nobody.
Nobody 2.
Yep.
And I have a third one. I can't remember what I have.
Sure. Who do you think is gonna win, or like who has the best roster?
Well, if someone has 2/3 of Lilo and Stitch, that might do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That
But
definitely.
It's fun, and you get a banner. I mean, it's called the Kevin Curran. It used to be called the Simpsons movie classic or something, but now every time one of our writers dies, we add their name to the thing. So eventually, it's gonna have like 10 names.
It's such a fun idea, and I feel like now that idea of like movie drafts has kind of picked up. Like I think The Ringer has like a movie draft and things like that, but 2009 is pretty early, I feel like.
Yeah, and I mean, I've never seen anyone do it exactly the way we do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like that guy Matthew Berry, who does a big former comedy writer, current NFL fantasy guru. He even had a website that did a version of it, and there's lots of versions of it where you kind of draft things, or you pick the movies you think are going to be the most successful. But the one where only one person can own each chunk of or each movie is
Right.
interesting.
Yeah, totally.
And it's but it is a fun night. It's just a super fun night of staff building. You get like a crazy food and a lot of arguments about whether people can give people advice or not.
You mentioned crazy food, and I feel like I'd be remiss not to bring this up because we spoke to Bill Oakley, I think it was last year, and we talked a lot. Unsurprisingly, with Bill, we talked a lot about food. What is the go-to?
A lovely man. In no way is he the Gordon Ramsay of fast food.
No,
He is.
shots fired.
Gordon Ramsay is a angry rageaholic reality show manipulator who is also a cook and a chef and a restaurateur. Bill is a lover of snacks and fast food and dips and chips. Bill's the Roger Ebert of fast food. He's a
There you go.
charming person who is super smart and loves his art form, which is those foods.
I love that. He should put that on his website.
Yeah, the Roger Ebert of food.
I don't mean that as a bigness related thing.
Yes, no, of course. Of course.
It
You mean
as
just
a purely his sense of humor and his intellect.
Totally.
yes, of course. What are you guys eating these days in the room? Have you transitioned to health food, or is it still mostly?
I try to eat super healthy. I love Goop Kitchen. I know people make fun of the Paltrow empire. That is the perfectly engineered, healthy takeout food.
Okay.
I don't know if you've have that in Toronto and New Jersey, but Gwyneth Paltrow has a kind of healthy, super like salmon, vegetable, gluten-free boxes.
Great.
And have bento boxes and salads and wraps that are unbelievably satisfying taste-wise and filled up wise, but also pretty healthy and protein, macros, all that stuff.
Yeah. It's very we have a lot of the sort of like bowl places, right, where you can get like your grains and your proteins and your greens and all of that, and like that. It sounds kind of in that vein.
Right. I mean, anything tender. I love tender greens. I don't know what are the global chains. Tender greens. There's a place called Moon Bowls that I really like. Sweet greens, like any of the just like protein, veg forward foods. Because like if you have even a sandwich can really take you out for the afternoon.
Totally.
Yeah. I worked in TV for a while as an editor, and I will say like those. Whenever production was buying lunch, you kind of wanted to ball out because you're like, "Oh, I'm not paying for my lunch today."
Right.
But I would very frequently make the mistake of ordering the wrong thing and then being completely useless for the rest of
It's
my
the devil's
day.
bargain, and then also like most foods are best in the restaurant. Like
Yeah.
True.
arguably, takeout food from a great restaurant is worse than hot food from just a regular okay restaurant.
Yeah,
totally.
Like hot
totally.
food is really good. And so just get the things that travel. Don't look to like satisfy your greediest urges at work. They make those a treat for after work, and then go nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
exactly.
advice. Okay, so we're coming up on time, but
Good.
I did want to do a real test of your memory here.
Oh no. It's gonna be-
Sorry, Matt.
Should I say one other lame thing about Gordon Ramsay?
Please.
And
Of course.
and movie tropes.
Yeah.
So actually, one of the cool things about the new Mission Impossible, I thought, is that they bring back the kind of day player from Mission Impossible 1.
Yes.
As this guy whose life was ruined. That's actually a very Simpsons-y idea.
Right.
That's a very...
Yes, it really is.
Giving that movie points for that, I am at least. That's a very Simpsons idea that this guy who's just supposed to be kind of a nerd who doesn't know how Tom Cruise stole his data.
Right.
He was banished to Alaska or wherever, St. Nowhere Island, and then has this big romance with a native Inuit lady or something, and then saves the world. So, but in Mission Impossible 1 had that iconic, Tom Cruise floating around set piece. Again, those
so
are
good.
harder. It's harder for regular movies to generate those iconic things anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because movies, the monoculture doesn't exist, but maybe also movies just haven't been up to the task. But I did see a poster the other day for a new Gordon Ramsay cooking reality show where he's in the stupid Tom Cruise harness floating above the fucking stove or something. Like, that is a...
God help us.
That's still resonant. Somehow, people making that poster made Gordon Ramsay or AI Gordon Ramsay sit in a harness to sell that it was I bet I don't know that the show is called Kitchen Impossible, but I bet it is.
Right.
Right.
So to their credit, I mean, if the show is called Kitchen Impossible, you do stuff from Mission Impossible. But
right.
That's like what, 25 years old, right?
Yeah.
It's 30 at this point. Yeah.
30. So come on, movies and audiences, create more iconic Hannibal Lecter wow moments and let us feed off of you.
Yeah, I mean, and also, they should have had Gordon Ramsay climbing the Burj Khalifa at least or something. It's been a long time.
Yeah, that's also the Mission Impossible movie that most people don't even remember because it's a weird Brian De Palma thriller. I mean, I love it, but because it's a weird Brian De Palma thriller.
It feels like the outlier in the series now, weirdly.
Exactly, yeah.
Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, so would love to do a lightning round of movie references from season 36.
Okay. Well, that's better.
So the idea is, obviously we don't have commentaries anymore, so it's a little harder sometimes to pick up on some of those little references throughout the series.
Yeah.
So,
and it's sort of less fun to go on social media too and explain this stuff.
Right, totally. Much more fun to be in a room with people. But
we might have a new venue for that sort of thing coming up. That's a little teaser.
That's very, very exciting. I mean, Adam and I grew up on the commentary, so that would be amazing.
We might be of a system that you would not be shocked by the words that would allow us to deliver reference backstory.
Right.
Interesting.
A reference story backstory vehicle, not unlike the thing we're on right now.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. So basically, I'm going to try to read out a couple references I think I spotted while rewatching.
Okay.
And
please.
You can say yes, no, or pass, and to confirm, deny, or be like, I have no idea.
Okay.
Desperately Seeking Lisa. When Julian refers to the Upper East Side as the Forbidden Zone, is this a reference to Planet of the Apes?
I mean, only in as much as people would... The Forbidden Zone has become part of how people talk.
Sure.
But I don't think it's explicitly he's thinking about the apes. But if that's where that comes from in our cultural dialogue, then that's where that would have happened.
Right. It's now part of the general fund of cultural whatever, pop culture. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay.
Fair enough.
Same episode. This is a real deep cut. The original ending of After Hours actually has Paul escaping in a hot air balloon.
No.
Yes.
Judging by your reaction, I think I know the answer here, Nate.
Yeah. So I was curious if there was any influence on that, but that was they moved away from that, but that was one of the possible endings when they were trying to figure it out.
Golly gee. I really want to ask Tim Long.
Yeah, if you knew that.
If he knew that. Wow.
Either way. I mean, it is actually pretty different though, still. The float is a fantastic ending, so.
Maybe.
That's a maybe. Okay.
Maybe. It's a maybe also.
Okay. Trios of Horror 35? Yeah, that must be 35. Is the style of the segment The Fall of the House of Monty a parody of a movie? It seems kind of in the vein of Guillermo del Toro, Roger Corman movies or something, but do you know if there's any kind of style parody going on there?
I guess there were these horror movies, I believe, called The Hammer,
Yeah.
films, which was we were trying to emulate those, and also a little bit of Roger Corman, like those kind of corny Vincent Price,
Yes.
had Mad Men in a Mansion kind of movies. You know, it's just a simple kind of a haunting, cheapo, but also highly melodramatic and often very bloody. But we weren't that bloody. Yeah, because we put on like a film treatment to it, and yeah, it was definitely like those kind of Roger Corman Hammer films type. And I apologize to your cinephile fans that I don't have a encyclopedic memory of those things, but like it was definitely for sure like a love letter to that genre of like the crazy madman. The whole movie is him just getting his just desserts.
Yeah, totally. I just started rewatching those Roger Corman, Edgar Allan Poe movies. They're a hell of a lot of fun.
There's a Poe. I think there's a Poe. I think the Raven is in there somewhere.
Yeah. They did do a Raven one. It's like pretty adapted from, because it's just a poem. But
I think we put the Bart Raven in that segment.
Oh, cool.
Yes, I think I did. I
That's cool.
I did see that. Yeah.
I think we did a little self Easter egg. See, the Simpsons is so old now, we can just do parodies of ourselves.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Parodies of other Simpsons movies.
Denim.
Denim.
Amazing segment, and I'm a huge fan of stop motion, so that was really exciting. On that note, is the way the pants move at all inspired by Wallace and Gromit? The wrong trousers.
Well, that's that's another fantastic question. I don't know that the Stupid Buddies guys who are the animation stop motion house that did that, I don't know that they did or did not. We did not say that. But of course, now that you say it, it seems so obvious. Of course, this is a version of the wrong trousers.
Right. There's a moment where I think it's Marge is in the pants and it walks up the wall. That looks a lot like the wrong trousers. But yeah, interesting.
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
If it's not true, we're morons.
And then also in Denim, the part where the pants kind of like there's a lightning flash in an alleyway and then the pants appear. That's got to be the Terminator, right?
Sure. Yes, our old friend, the Terminator.
Yeah, that was a great one that I definitely saw.
Although originally, when those pants unzipped, the first version of it was, this is like a visit to the OBGYN. We had to kind of tone it down with incidental, pap smear, sci-fi pap smear.
Simpson Wicked This Way Comes. Any movie sort of inspiration for the vibe of that, because it's so evocative, like it's such an amazing episode.
Well, there's all Ray Bradbury stories, and all three of those stories have been made into movies and shows, like the what is the Crying Woman short story?
Right.
The woman was buried alive. I mean, the middle one, I don't know that the building the robots of yourself. I don't know if that was ever filmed or made into. But they did like whole like anthology shows about like Ray Bradbury stories and so who knows? And then of course Fahrenheit 451 has been made into bunches of things.
Right. Totally.
And the kind of like dystopian, stark Bauhaus cultural oppression future that one warned us about. I'm trying to think if there was a specific. It was more just a kind of a genre of like messed up, fascist dystopias that we thought was original, it was all based on numbing you with good intellectual things as opposed to garbage.
Right.
The structure of that, of the guy who realizes the system he's a part of is bullshit and then goes on the run and then of course leads the bad guys he thinks he's reached the promised land, but then has led the bad guys there and everything is destroyed, is a pretty familiar, sci-fi kind of end of the world storytelling for 6 minutes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are so many sci-fi movies that use that kind of language in terms of like the brutalist architecture and all of that. Right. I'm gonna do a couple more. So
I'm impressed. Thank you for watching season 36.
Oh yeah, it was a great watch. This is actually one of my favorite episodes. Was P.S. I Hate You. You were talking a little bit about emotionality. I thought that one really hit me in terms of just connecting back to the
really
characters. So there's a moment where Marge goes to Patty and Selma and asks for help. And there's a shot right at the beginning of that scene. It's like a dark background and it's Marge and it's kind of zooming out a little bit. Is that a parody of The Godfather? The opening.
Well, it's definitely I don't know exactly what in The Godfather, but it's definitely a Godfather rep, because you're misleading that it's Fat Tony.
Right.
That's going to, you think she's asking Fat Tony for help.
Right.
And of course, then it's just Patty and Selma at an Italian restaurant. So yeah, that was definitely, we were trying to build up a big Godfather energy there.
Got it. It looks a lot like the very beginning, the like, I believe in America, moment.
I'm sure we were doing that.
Cool.
The parody, if we do this, we always make fun of this as the lamest Simpsons parody in the world, which is not, I guess it is also a movie, but would be Simpsons Christmas Carol.
Right.
With Bert, it's so obvious. Oh, and Burns is Scrooge, and Homer is Bob Cratchit, and Bart and/or Lisa are Tiny Tim, and Moe is Jacob Marley. Like, it's so fucking obvious. Just mash up brain candy that we I'm not saying we're never going to do it, because people will, but it's definitely the laziest, most obvious thing we make fun of.
Right. Maybe needs a twist or something to just kind of put it over the top. That's cool.
Please, if that happens, excoriate us. No problem.
I had to ask, so Abe League of their Mo, man, that one's hard to say.
League of their Mo, sure.
Yeah.
Best title ever.
There's a great gag in the episode where Grandpa says that he and Mo are like a great team, like Martin and Lewis, and then you have, Martin Prince and Lewis Clark going by. Right.
Horrible.
Is that
horrible?
So, like, obviously, it's a play on Martin and Lewis, the famous comedy team, but are the names of Martin and Lewis the characters originally from Martin and Lewis? Do you know?
I don't think so. I could ask.
Coincidence.
I could ask Matt Groening, but that would be. I think it was just something that was floating in the ether for us to just take.
Yeah.
That these two characters happen to have the same name.
Yeah.
That's possible.
Yeah, I think I noticed that like
deep past
a little while before you made that joke, and then when you made it, I was like, oh, maybe it is a thing. But we did the Nutty Professor on the podcast like a long while ago, and so we're kind of looking at the history of Martin and Lewis and all of that. And anyway, fascinating. It's a great gag one way or the other.
Very sweet. Sweet that they're friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Before we go, Matt, we have a running gag on our show that basically every time we cover an episode, I end up being like, this is one of my top 10 favorite episodes. And we're now like 50 episodes in. So clearly that, 10 is maybe loosey-goosey. But I do wonder, do you have an episode that you think of as sort of like North Star represents the very best of the show, either from the era that you were working on the show, or it could be an era, that predates you or recently. But I'm just curious what you might consider to be sort of like the greatest episode that the show has ever done.
I don't know. That's so hard. It's really hard.
I know you've got a lot to choose from.
There's a lot, and the ones that you worked on, you have a weird sort of creator relationship with, where you see the flaws and you've seen it 1,000 times, and you can't really appreciate it as a fan. Can I just say an episode I like a lot that I think is
of course.
I think hits a lot of buttons that I happen to have written, but that's not why it's good or bad. Is that I know no one would ever put this on their list of anything, but I think it hits a lot of the notes that I personally like of like very silly movie parody guys, parody, and sort of a little bit of like light amateur philosophy, which I always like. About like religion or the afterlife or faith and why and big scenes of rationalization. I always think it's funny when characters rationalize doing something bad. The episode is called, I know your viewers are hanging on their dog. They're walking their dog right now and they just can't. What is he going to say? What's he going to say? I can't. Hold on. They grab the dog. I need to hear this big reveal. It's a show called Sky Police from season something where it's a parody of the the movie of the card counting movie with Kevin Spacey. Sorry, everybody. And the card counting movie that I can't remember the name of, 21.
It was called 21. Yeah.
21, there we go. But it's also about the notion of card counting, and it has a theme. It has a big righteous speech about how card counting should be legal if you're good enough to do it.
Right.
Like the idea that they actually, if you're actually good at beating the system using your brain, it shouldn't be. It changed the system. Don't kick those people out of the casino.
Right.
Anyway, it also has Marge, talking about what religion means to her and what is God? Is he up there controlling you, or is he just something that's kind of a source of beauty in the world? And it has a crazy Chief Wiggum as a jetpack, and so I don't know. I just feel it's like it's something that there's a special episode to me that hits a lot of the creative things that I like, and it has a movie parody, of course. Well,
there you go. Maybe we'll have to cover it on the show, and you can come back and give us all the sort of behind the scenes.
It also teaches you how to. It actually has actual information that it shows you how card counting works.
Well, there you go.
There you go. That's
so
awesome.
it's you learn, you laugh and you learn, which is that's the best of the Simpsons is when both of those things happen. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. This was so fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for your loving website and podcast, and we should use it more.
Hey, it's there.
If you ever want to look something up, you can always do the search. Thanks again, and obviously everyone should go and watch The Simpsons. Season 36. It's all on Hulu, on Disney Plus. And of course, people should stay tuned for the next 4 seasons.
There's a cool new thing on Disney Plus that they did for us, which is a thing called Simpsons Streams.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a certain type of Disney Plus membership, there's like a Super Simpsons page, and it's kind of like what we used to call a TV channel, in that it is just constantly showing Simpsons episodes. You don't get to pick. You just click it on and see what happens to be on TV. Right. But right now it's just showing the whole series all the way through on loop.
Mm-hmm.
But we're gonna start messing with that and do one. The next one we're gonna do is just all Homer episodes.
Wow.
The sort of Homer Palooza stream. And so anytime you want, you can go to Disney Plus and just it'll I don't know what order they'll be in, but it'll be only the 300 Homer episodes or however many it is.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's great to have that stream back and just the kind of randomness of discovery that gets lost a little bit with streaming.
Right. For sure.
Yeah, unfortunately it's not on Canadian Disney Plus, and I'm so incredibly jealous because that's how I grew up watching. We've talked about this on the show before. That
Disney Plus?
I don't know.
Different.
It's just everything's different up here.
I'll ask about that.
Honestly, maybe it's a licensing thing. I don't know, but I would love to have it because that's Nate and I grew up in that era where up here in Canada, there were multiple TV stations where back to back ran Simpsons, so you could sit for a nice 4-hour block and get a random melange of Simpsons episodes, and that's my favorite way to watch the show. So
right, that is good. And perfect for second and third screening also.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what everyone wants.
Thank you again, Matt. It's been such a pleasure. And please, you're welcome back anytime. That was so much fun. And again, thank you, Matt, for speaking with us. It was so great getting to nerd out and learn a little bit more about that whole creative process at Simpsons HQ, as it were.
Absolutely.
Obviously, though, we would be remiss if we were not to mention the fact that as of this recording date, we were sad to hear about the recent passing of Alf Clausen, the composer of The Simpsons from 1990 until 2017. And I really think a crucial part of what made The Simpsons feel so cinematic and was able to really help with so many of those movie parodies, because a lot of the time, as we've sort of discussed, it wasn't necessarily a visual parody, but it might be a musical parody or a sound alike.
Right.
And as our fans are aware, we did a whole mini series about Simpsons musical numbers, which often had music written by Clausen, along with lyrics from writers like Jeff Martin and others. We've been singing his praises for years now, and I'm really sad to hear that he is now unfortunately no longer with us.
Yeah, it really is sad, and he's such a hero, I think, of our podcast because of his huge contribution to the as you were saying, the cinematicness of The Simpsons. And really, his music is probably still one of the most underappreciated sources of movie references on the show.
Yeah.
And because when we were putting together our big database of references on our website, so many of the new things that we found were these little musical riffs that are in the score from Clausen's amazing work, to references or with references to things like, The Magnificent Seven or Psycho or all sorts of classic movies. And I do suspect that we'll continue uncovering more of Alf Clausen's sound-alikes on the show for years to come. So we'll still get a chance to keep talking about him and singing his praises. And, I was just amazed in the story about his passing in Variety. They were saying that, he's believed to hold the record for both the most original scores written for any single American TV series, with nearly 600 episodes. And he holds the record for the most Emmy nominations for any composer with 30 nominations. So truly one of the greats.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, as the kids would say, greatest of all time. He certainly is up there. And I mean, even outside of his work as, writing musical parodies, like so many of my favorite moments from The Simpsons are those Simpsons songs. I think of Who Needs the Quickie Mart and, stuff like that. And those don't exist without Alf. So rest in peace, Alf. We will get working on the commemorative pogs as soon as we can. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us for this special one-off episode of the Springfield Googleplex, the movie podcast for Simpson fans. As we said, we're currently recording our next season. We're working on something really special. We've got that on the go right now, so be sure to tune in the fall when we return. We have lots of great episodes lined up and some really cool guests that I'm very, very excited about. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave us a review and share this episode with the Simpson fans and film buffs in your life. We've also set up a support page on our website where, if you want, you can throw us a couple of bucks to help cover the cost of making this show. We really do appreciate it. As I mentioned, we'll be back with our regular bi-weekly episodes in September, but stay tuned. We may have another surprise episode coming this summer, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. Until then, Nate,
we'll see you around the Plex.